Welcome, everyone. Hold on one second here. Okay, we are recording. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to today's roundtable, What Bosses Must Do to Engage Remote Employees. My name is Denise Delisle, and your moderator today is my counterpart, Katie Dykstra, who is Vice President of the NHRC. We will be presenting in webinar mode today, so if you have any questions, you can ask those in the chat box. As a side note, please stay for the entire presentation if you want to be part of our raffle. Our speakers will be happy to answer any questions that you may have after the 30-minute presentation. We are happy to introduce our three speakers today, Sean Dauber and Alec Wolliver, who are here from Horton and have graciously agreed to be our sponsor for today's roundtable. They will be discussing what's new in the benefits world today. Our featured speaker is respected authority on cultivating commitment in the workplace, Joe Mull, the author of two books, Cure for the Common Leader and No More Team Drama. He teaches leaders how to be better bosses and build stronger teams. Prior to launching his own practice, he managed training for one of the largest physician groups in the country, more than 9,000 employees, over 500 locations. He is the host of the Boss Better Now podcast. He has taught leadership courses at two major universities, and his TEDx talk on why gossip starts and spreads in the workplace has been viewed by more than 3,000 people. Joe is a speaker, author, and recovering HR professional. And now let me turn it over to Sean Dauber and Alec Wolliver, who are from Horton.
Well, thank you very much, Denise, and thanks for having us today. We appreciate it. And Katie, we're going to start and just give a little bit of background on a few trends we're seeing in benefits and just a couple suggestions for HR professionals and teams that are just looking to maybe consider enhancing part of their packages, or just some soft considerations that are very easy to implement and to consider if you're going through open enrollment or for your upcoming enrollment this year in January, whatever fits your situation. So Alec is going to take us through a couple of slides, and we'll get through this fairly quickly so that Joe can start his presentation.
Yep. Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you, Sean. And I appreciate everybody joining this morning. As Sean said, we're just going to cover a few trends that we're seeing. And I think what you'll notice is a lot of these are being driven by what's happened over the past year with the COVID-19 pandemic. But with that said, we'll jump right in. So, number one, not a secret to everybody that there's a lot of households that own pets in the United States. So about 67 U.S. households keep pets, and we're seeing about 96% of those households having either dogs or cats. And then we have this whole idea of quarantine puppies. Over the past year, we've actually seen about 11 million U.S. homes welcome new pets into the house. You can see the left here. This is a picture of actually Sean's dog. He's one of those 11 million. What's his name, Sean?
Gatsby.
Yeah, it's a little golden doodle. So obviously a very common situation. I think a lot of people heard in the news that shelters were, pretty much empty. A lot of people adopting pets, which is great. In addition to that, with people being home, they've shown that there's more likelihood of people bringing their pets in for various veterinary care that's needed, whether it's just because they have more time, it's easier because they're working from home, different factors like that. When employees do, or when people do bring their pets in for vet care, obviously it can be a costly thing. We're seeing that in 2021, projecting 20 billion to be spent on veterinary care in the U.S. alone, and a lot of that's driven by the routine things, immunizations, just general checkups. There's also kind of the more unexpected and sometimes emergency situations, which can be, as you can see here, just some examples, pretty significant as a financial burden for people that do own pets. So it's something that does come up, and a lot of people owning pets and having to go in for these certain services here and there, it can be a huge financial burden. And I'm sure, as kind of everybody can imagine at this point, where we're getting at this is the idea of pet insurance as an employee benefit. So is it a good solution for the problem of these higher cost activities that might go on if you bring a pet into the vet? So currently we see about a little under 3 million pets that are insured in the U.S. and it's growing very rapidly at about 22% per year. The way that pet insurance generally works is it's a reimbursement style plan. There's varying levels of coverage available. It might be, example, 50%, 70%, or 90%. But under, the 90% example, say you had to go in for an emergency for your dog, needed a surgery done, and you had a $10,000 vet bill, that plan would actually reimburse you 90% of the cost, or $9,000. So in some cases, it can be extremely, helpful coverage to have if you find yourself in one of those situations. From a cost perspective, depending on the level of coverage that you're purchasing, we can see it range from $30 to $80 per month. Is kind of a good baseline. And obviously, this is something that's offered on a group platform through employers most commonly. It's usually voluntary, meaning 100% employee paid. And there's a number of carriers that will do it, some better than others. But at a baseline, we generally see that they're looking for about 100 total employees to offer it to. Now, the good thing is that can include part-timers, which for employers looking to do unique things to offer benefits to all their employees, not just full-timers, this can be a good option to offer. Sean, did you want to add anything there?
Was just going to mention, you think about this just generational change. You think about people who had pets in the 70s, and 80s. I mean, most people would never spend the kind of money that people are spending on their pets today. Even at Horton, we hire all of our new employees. Invariably, every employee talks about their pets like they're their kids, right? Oh, I've got 2 kids. That we get a little background on what they do and what their prior life is. They all talk about their pets. So if you're looking to enhance benefits and you have enough employees, this is a fairly easy program to implement, and employees really appreciate the benefits. So that's why we're really addressing it.
Yeah, and finally, one other thing to touch on, we think this is a good visual that just shows that it is a very practical benefit to offer. So, we've got just some ideas of annual interactions with certain needs, whether it be critical illness, need for eye care. Obviously, vision insurance is very common, but all these different things here are actually dwarfed by the amount of vet visits that happen annually. So your chances are there is a need in your employee base for a benefit like this. And as Sean said, it's something that's very easy to add, be done voluntary, so it doesn't need to be a cost item for the company, but can be a nice way to enhance your benefit package. So now we're going to jump to maybe not as fun of a topic, but life insurance. So something that we've seen in response to COVID-19, Hartford actually did a study that showed it's the number one benefit that people are most interested in securing at their next open enrollment if they hadn't already done so. There's just kind of an increased interest in it with everything that has gone on, which isn't surprising. So a couple things with this. Number one, we're having success helping employers negotiate new open enrollment periods. And what that means is, generally with voluntary life coverage, when employees first become eligible, they can qualify for a guaranteed issue amount. So it might be, $100,000 or $150,000 that they can secure through the group plan without needing to go through any evidence of insurability or any medical underwriting. If they waive that the first time around, usually if they go back to get at the next open enrollment, they do have to complete that EOI, which for some people can be difficult if they have past conditions or family history of certain things. But we've actually had a lot of success helping employers work with their carriers to bring in a new open enrollment so that everybody gets another bite at the apple, and that can help people a lot and that are looking to get this coverage. Also, just negotiating higher guaranteed issue amounts. So employers that maybe historically have had 50,000 or 100,000 in guaranteed issue, getting that increase to 150,000 or different levels above, just to give employees more opportunity to buy more coverage without needing to go through that underwriting process. Another thing that we've seen is carriers offering new and interesting features and riders on the policies. There's a lot of carriers that do, obviously they all have different things that they do, a ton of them out there. We don't have time to cover them all, but we just want to highlight one that we think is particularly helpful. It's offered through Guardian, which is a very reputable carrier in the space. This is called Life Assist. So how it works is that it's available to employers that are offering long-term disability coverage through the Guardian, along with either basic life and or voluntary life. It can be added for a very nominal cost, sometimes negotiated in for no cost at all. But how it works is if an employee were to get severely disabled, they would be able to increase their long-term disability benefit payout by 1% of the basic life coverage amount and or 1% of the voluntary life coverage amount that they have. So to give you kind of an example of how this works, if you look at the bottom here, this employer offers employees a $50,000 paid life in AD&D policy, and this specific employee makes $30,000 a year. So under a traditional, long-term disability policy without this benefit added, they would qualify for 60% of their monthly earnings of $2,500, which would be $1,500. The life assist added, they get an additional 1% of the basic life amount, so 1% of 50,000, which is 500 per month added to their payout on a long-term disability, bringing their actual benefit up to 2,000. And this can be enhanced if there's also voluntary life involved. So definitely a nice thing that can be added. And again, for not having to add, much of a cost, in many cases, no cost at all. Something interesting that you can add just to continue to enhance the benefits. Sean, did you want to touch anything else?
Generally what we see, most employees expect to get these benefits through their employer. We don't find employees often take the time to secure these types of coverage outside their employer. So when they are offered, we very often these programs become inert because the medical plans are so expensive. The life insurance is not always considered, but because of the pandemic and because of the additional awareness people have, because of the illness, the long haulers, people that have had experience, people that have passed away because of COVID, it is worth spending a little time on your package just to make sure the life insurance is, is optimized as it can be.
So one other thing to touch on as far as the life insurance, obviously benchmarking is something that we try to help provide clients to give them a better idea of where they stand as to what they offer versus their industry peers. This exhibit below is an example. It's very broad. We generally like to get a little bit more granular by industry, by size, by region, but just to give you an idea of some examples of what employers are offering their employees on a paid life policy. You can see it's about a half and half split between employers that are doing a fixed amount, whether it's a 25,000, 50,000, 100,000, and then the other end doing a multiple of salary, which is fairly common. Then to the right, if they are doing a multiple of salary, what is that capping out of? At the vast majority, it's 500,000. So, if you look at this, you could say, okay, most employers do a one-time salary up to 500,000. So just more data that we can provide. We'd be happy to, get more granular with this if needed for anybody that's interested. And last topic we just wanted to touch on was disability. So very similar to life insurance, as Sean said, there's been a renewed interest in this, increased interest with things that are going on. A lot of ways to offer this. A lot of employers already do offer this, whether it be on a company paid basis, as voluntary or employee paid, short-term, long-term, a lot of different options there. But, similar to life, what we wanted to touch on here is that if employees waived a voluntary disability policy, when they first became eligible, again, we've had success in helping employers negotiate the opportunity to let everybody get another enrollment period without needing to go through that evidence of insurability. So it's something that's easy to do, and with people, more interested in it now than in the past, being able to provide that without needing to do the evidence of insurability for employees that waived it in the past is a nice benefit to add.
Yeah. And I think when we look at just claims in general for our employer groups and for employees, the most horrific event, obviously death being one of them, but the disability is the one element that employees just can't survive without having income. So I know employees love their vision insurance, they love, their dental insurance, but those things can generally be managed even if you don't have programs or insurance. But disability is by far the one thing that happens the least, but when it does happen, it's the most horrific. So if it's another good opportunity because of the pandemic, because of the renewed interest, employees really appreciate if you're going to take the time to make sure they have the right programs. And next, our information, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either Alec or me. We'd be happy to get back to you. Our direct lines are there in our email address. And now we're going to hand it off to Joe. Joe is as Denise had mentioned earlier, is a really good motivational speaker. I've heard him speak on a number of occasions, and he's really fantastic. So we're going to hand it off to Joe so he can start his presentation. Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, good morning. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today. I am just making sure that we've got everything up on the screen properly here. I think we just need Alec to mute his screen. There we go. And then we change one more setting on here. And we should be good to go. All right, folks, my name is Joe Mull, and I want to start with a question this morning, and that question is this. By a show of hands, how many of you here today are someone's boss? Now, yes, I know we are gathering virtually and that I can't see your hands, but if you raised your hand, congratulations, you are the topic of dinner conversation at other people's houses. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever thought about it that way. I'm not sure if that's how you think about your role, but it's true. And it's true because you possess a tremendous amount of influence over how people think about their work and how they view their work. That's better. We were having a little trouble there getting me full screen for you. The reason you have so much influence as a leader is because you're the only one who has both the power and the opportunity to create the conditions that lead employees to care and try and give their all. In fact, the data has consistently told us over and over again that the single most influential factor in an employee's engagement is their boss, the quality of the relationship they have with their boss, and that person's ability to meet a fairly complex set of emotional and psychological needs. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And you've already heard me talk about and use this term that gets thrown around a lot. It's almost a buzzword nowadays, employee engagement. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define what that means. Too often when I stand in front of rooms to do workshops or training or keynote at conferences, and I ask folks, how many people here have ever done an employee engagement survey? Lots of hands go up. How many folks here have ever been on an employee engagement steering committee where you're taking that data and you're looking to make changes or respond to it and to drive engagement in your organization? And about half the hands in the room go up. And so I'll often say, great, what is it? If you have a lot of experience, you've been doing a lot of work around employee engagement, then in a sentence, give it to me. What is it? And oftentimes we don't know the answer. We get folks who aren't able to give it to us in a single sentence. And so what I'm going to do is give it to you. I'm going to actually give you two definitions, and I only care that you remember the second. Here's the first. Employee engagement is the degree to which employees are fully involved in and enthusiastic about their work, and thus they act in a way that furthers the interests of the team, the organization, and the customer. So if you look closely at this definition, there are two parts. The first part, fully involved in and enthusiastic about. So this is a reference to an emotional and psychological commitment. The second part of the definition, they act in a way that furthers the interests of the team, the organization, and the customer. This is the energy and the effort that people deploy as a result of that emotional and psychological commitment. So when you think about employee engagement, I really want you to think about those two components. When I wrote my first book, I used this definition a lot. And early on in the process, my editor called me up and said, can we talk about this definition? I said, sure, Bonnie, what's up? She said, I think it's a little bit academic. It's a little bit clunky and verbose. I think you should make an effort to say this in a pithier way. I said, sure, no problem. You got it, Bonnie. Hung up the phone, fired up the Google, looked up the definition of the word pithier, P-I-T-H-I-E-R. Concise, simplified, easy to understand, often in a folksy kind of way. I am none of those things. I'm a bit of an academic. I'm verbose. I'm a little bit clunky. And so I had to work on it, and it took me a little while. But once I got it, I think I got it. And so I took that academic definition for employee engagement and I tweaked it, and I wanted to make sure that it had both of the right parts in it that we just talked about. And so for now and going forward, I don't care if you remember the definition that I just showed you. Instead, I want you to remember this definition. Employee engagement is the degree to which employees care and try. Care, emotional and psychological commitment, try, the energy and effort that they deploy as a result of that commitment. It's a much easier definition to remember, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to take a quick little pause here just to make sure you can see me on your screen. I see a message in the chat that came up a few minutes ago. I want to make sure that you all aren't staring at a blank screen. So say hello, say hi, say it works, say something in the chat box here so we know that this is working for everybody. Hello, Drew, hello, Jamie, hello, Michael. Good. All of it is working properly. We can see you. Fantastic. Virtual high five for everyone. We don't have to rack our brains to figure out what leads to engagement. All right, Sean and Alec were talking about this a little bit, that of all the different buttons that we try to push and levers that we try to pull and benefits and conditions that we try to create that will lead people to be able to give it all they've got. And the truth is that we know in general what the conditions are that lead people to care and try. In organizations that enjoy low turnover and high customer satisfaction, where workers say, I love it here, we see the same conditions over and over again. This is the list. Employees tell us, I have opportunities to learn, grow, and advance. There is an alignment of my talents and skills to the job I am in. I believe my work matters, that I make a difference. I get to form meaningful relationships with my teammates and leaders. I have the information, materials, and equipment I need to do my job. My opinions are solicited and considered. I enjoy frequent and specific recognition, and I perceive that my pay and benefits are fair and adequate. This is the list. And there are a couple of things that I want to point out relative to these conditions. The first is where they come from. Think about this. If you go to work every day and you hear about opportunities to learn, grow, and advance, who is the person you are most likely hearing about those from? Type your answer in the chat box. If you hear about opportunities to learn, grow, and advance at work, who is the person most likely on the other side of that conversation with you? Eileen says, my manager. Yep, that's the answer. If you are hearing about an alignment of your talents and skills to the job, if someone is noticing that you're good at a particular thing, and then they work to help you do that particular thing more and align your duties with those talents, who is that person doing the noticing and the alignment? It's your boss. If you hear about ways that you make a difference, that your work matters, who is the person most likely telling you that? It's your boss. If you get the chance to form meaningful relationships with the people around you at work, who is making sure that there are time and opportunity for that? It's your boss. Tick, 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 down the list we can go. And for nearly everything on this list, if I'm getting it as an employee, I'm getting it from my boss. I wasn't just making you feel good when I told you that bosses are the single most influential factor in employee engagement. It turns out you're kind of a big deal. You've probably heard the stat that 75% of people who quit a job indicate that their boss is part or all of the reason why. And it's true, and it shows up over and over again in the data. People don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. And so if we want to engage employees, we have to make sure that bosses are equipped with the knowledge to create these conditions, as well as the skills. Now, obviously, in 2020, a lot of things changed. First, obviously, the environment changed where people were working. For many folks, they were working from home. They were teleworking. They were doing remote and virtual communication. The other thing that changed in 2020 was the frequency and access to all of these kinds of experiences. Almost everything on this list in most workplaces certainly decreased. And in some places, they vanished entirely. If we want to answer the question, how do I engage remote employees? The most important word in that question isn't remote, because while the circumstances have changed, these things have not. These are still the emotional and psychological buttons and levers that lead people to care and try. What we have to do as leaders is figure out, how do I go from creating these conditions when we're all together in the office to creating these conditions when we're all here in a little box like this. So I want this list to be your guide. And in fact, right now, I'm going to drop into the chat box for you a copy of the slides, these little guys here that I had up on the screen, so that you can download this and share it. Should be able to drop it in here. Okay, that's turned off as a function. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to email you this PDF after the program today so that you have a copy of all of this stuff here. And you can share this with your teams and use it to drive your work as a leader and your conversation. So we'll make sure you get that over email. Okay. What I want you to also understand about this list is that, by and large, engagement is based on perception. You can look at this list, and this is what happens a lot with leaders when I do conferences and workshops. I show them this list and they go, we do this, we do this, we do that, we do that, tick, 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 down the list. And they say, we do all of these things. Well, then why is your engagement 33%? The truth is that it doesn't matter if you think you do these things. The only thing that matters is whether your employees, your personnel, believe that they experience these things at work. And so recognize that these perceptions are created by interaction. Are we talking to folks about opportunities to learn, grow, and advance? Are we talking to folks about their gifts and talents and strengths? Are we telling folks and showing them the ways in which their work matters and that they make a difference? Without those interactions, these conditions can't be created. And so we gathered today to talk about how to engage remote employees. And so the last thing I'm going to share with you is, how do you create these conditions inside a remote environment? And so here's my general advice. First, get tactical around each of these conditions. Stick this list up somewhere and ask yourself, how can I achieve that in a remote environment? How can I make sure people are having opportunities to learn, grow, and advance? How do I make sure people are getting a chance to form meaningful relationships with leaders and teams? Also, along getting tactical, how can you deliver these conditions without a meeting? I just saw a stat this morning that said email and chatting is up more than 40% in 1 year for most employees in their jobs as a result of remote work and the pandemic. It's a pretty remarkable shift. We all know people have Zoom fatigue. We all know people are tired of being forced into Zoom meetings. So can you do some of these things without asking people to sit in this square and turn their camera on? Sometimes it's as simple as sending a text message and checking in. Sometimes it's as simple as picking up the phone. Remember that old-fashioned thing that we used to stick up next to our ear and have conversations with? How can you achieve these conditions without requiring a meeting? The other thing to think about is those modalities that we're talking about. Can you change the modalities, the way in which you're communicating with your team? Can you send a note home? Write a letter, write a handwritten card to folks to tell them the difference that they're making in the lives of others. These are all important ways to engage remote employees that don't require it all to happen inside the little box. The other thing that I want to encourage you to do is to involve others in creating these conditions. For example, if it's important to you to create meaningful relationships across members of your teams, then ask people to set up connection calls with one another. Not necessarily group Zoom chats or cocktail hours. Those are important. They have their place. But are we just rotating, once a month by calling up a connection in our department, in our organization, and saying, hey, I just wanted to say hello and check in on you, and how are you doing? Or maybe you give everybody on the team an interesting question. On our podcast, Boss Better Now, every week we do a camaraderie question of the week, which is kind of a fun question that helps people find things in common with each other, because we know that builds camaraderie and reduces team drama. And so what if you give everyone on your team a question that they call around and talk to each other about just for 5 minutes? Change the modalities where you can and involve others. Also, and I think this might be the most important thing, remain flexible. Right now, there is a ton of emerging data around remote work. I actually just saw something this morning that I thought was really interesting. I was reading the news, and the headlines are amazing right now. There's a lot being said about what we've learned about remote work and what the impact has been and what people are going to want going forward. And just this morning, I read 2 articles back to back. The first cited data that said that remote workers en masse are resisting a return to the office. They're dying to permanently preserve their telework schedule. The second set of data proclaimed that telework has been a failed experiment and that remote workers, by and large, are dying to return to the office. And these things sort of seem to compete with each other, don't they? In a wide-ranging study that was done by Microsoft of more than 31,000 employees across more than a couple dozen different industries, they found that 66% of remote employees were craving a return to in-person work. And in the exact same survey, 70% of respondents said they were hopeful they would be able to preserve some aspect of remote work. Those numbers sound like they may be in conflict with each other, don't they? But they're not. People want to connect with their peers, but they also want some flexibility in how and where and when they work. There is no broad consensus yet on what works best related to remote work, on what most people want or what your company should do. And I would argue that there probably never will be. That's because what works for one person is different than what works for another. Here's what we know about engagement. When you give employees autonomy and influence, their engagement goes up. And that includes where, when, and how they work. And so I think that the organizations who commit to flexibility at the individual level, and those organizations who encourage their frontline and mid-level leaders to engage in open dialogue that prioritizes worker needs and wants, those are going to be the ones who reap the rewards and for whom engagement goes up. The last couple of things on this list: define the destination, don't micromanage the travel. And what I mean is we have had a kind of epidemic of micromanagement in a remote environment where people are being asked to fill out daily or hourly reports. I saw an article in the New York Times not long ago about a company that had required monitoring. There were keyboard monitoring or camera monitoring of remote work, and that's absurd. And it's just a recipe for ratcheting up disengagement. There's a connection between that emotional and psychological commitment and trust. And when trust is absent in the workplace from a supervisor or from an organization, it drives down engagement, it drives up disengagement. And so in a remote environment, get clear about what you want people to accomplish in certain periods of time, but be open and flexible with how they get there. People get to their end result, into their work product in different ways. And so define the destination, don't micromanage the travel. And as I just said, start with trust. Every added layer of monitoring and reporting increases disengagement. So here's what I'd like to do now. What do you want to ask about? What questions do you have? We've got a few minutes here before we give away all of our fabulous prizes, where we can just chat a little bit about some of these topics. Is there something on this list that you'd like to know more about? Is there a particular challenge related to remote work that you're facing in your organization that you'd like to share with the group and that we can talk about? Go ahead and put your question in the chat box, and I'd be happy to answer them. And if you heard Alec or Sean say something a little while ago that you wanted more information about, we can certainly bring them back on as well. What would you like to know more about today? By the way, while you're thinking of your questions and entering them in the chat box, I am going to acknowledge that something Alec and Sean talked about applies to me too. Guilty as charged. This is Flash. He was the Dalmatian puppy that we adopted back in August. We have our big dog people. We've had dogs for years, and we decided to kind of have a little bit of a dream come true for me because I've always wanted a Dalmatian. And so Flash says hello. Flash says good morning. He is certainly a quarantine puppy. And shout out to any other Dalmatian owners or lovers out there today. I got a question from Christian. He says, dealing with a 24-hour operation, we struggle with grave shift employees turnover. Any insight on retention? And here's the really great thing about a program like this. We can kind of take a hive mind approach. So if there is somebody who just saw that question, who has innovated in this area or who has come up with solutions in this area, raise your hand and give us a 1 or 2 sentence insight into what you've learned or done differently. And then maybe we can connect Christian with you in an effort to help him learn more. Christian, my first question back to you would be, what are the reasons people are citing for not staying in these positions? Is it a lack of advanced opportunity? Are folks accepting roles in the graveyard shift with the hope of eventually being able to move to daylight, and then those opportunities aren't there? Then certainly that would be a way to think about solving that problem. Maybe we need to be more honest with people when they come through the door that says, hey, if you're hoping to get to daylight from graveyard, that's probably going to take a long time. Please know that that's something that you'll have to be aware of as you get into this role. Sometimes we have to do that market analysis to see where is our compensation as it relates to other types of graveyard work. Christian says, hours and pay is the same with morning and afternoon shift, tends to be one of them. Love the suggestions on being transparent with them. Yeah. And let's be honest, if the market tells you that you're having a hard time filling a particular kind of role at a particular kind of time, then you may be able to put a little bit of tweaking around the compensation package for those kinds of things and draw people in. Also, find out who works that shift and loves it, and find out what they love about it. Start a dialogue, list those reasons, and then that becomes your marketing. If people tell you, I love that I'm able to put my kids on the school bus in the morning because I get home right before they go out the door. I love that. I love that I can do my doctor's appointments and run my errands, and then I sleep before going to work. I love the flexibility that this gives me for my kids and my family life and my personal life. You take all of that, that becomes how you sell the position. And you look for people who are looking for that. Okay. Sean says, can you address remote work for new employees versus long tenured, or employees in more transactional roles versus more complex informational roles? So here's the thing. I think there's a friction point coming around remote work. We all know that there are folks in the workplace who thrive when they are given the opportunity to be around other people, to have that interaction, to build those relationships. I don't think anybody would argue that communication and collaboration and innovation are boosted and exist at a higher level when people are in a shared space. When we all move to remote work, we lose a little something in those areas. And there's data that tells us that's true. And so there are going to be folks who return to the workplace. There are going to be leaders, managers who say, I need you all back in the building right now because we're not operating at our maximum potential around communication, collaboration, innovation, teamwork, quality. And you're going to have some folks who have really found the remote environment advantageous for them. And they're going to resist that. They're going to say, no, I don't want to take away what's working for me so that I can just be in the building to give you what's working for you. At the same time, there are folks for whom that remote work environment has been so deeply advantageous to them that when they resist returning in a maybe consistent or full-time way to the work environment, that those folks who feel like they need them in the room, they're going to start to resent that and say, why won't you contribute in this way? In some ways, this is very much an extroversion versus introversion conversation. How do people like to process information? Where do they get their energy from? How do they like to work and interact? And the truth is, it's going to be a balancing act. And so that's my kind of long precursor answer to your question, Sean. It's a balancing act. You're going to have to evaluate and study and look at what are our new employees who came in and have been remote, what are they not getting that we know that when people weren't being remote and hired and onboarded that they were getting? So you're going to need to collect some data and study and have some dialogue. The same is true from tenured versus those transactional kinds of roles. Are folks able to contribute at the highest level possible? I think that friction point that I'm talking about is only going to be solved when we are able to sit across from our employees and say, okay, We get some things by being together, but we know that many of you also get some things by being able to work remote. How do we construct a hybrid model that gives us the best of both worlds? Or maybe you're on site for some time and remote for others, or you have some flexibility to decide when you're on time. I don't think it's unreasonable for an organization to say, I hear you, you really enjoy remote, you'd like it to be full time. I hear that, but we know that we are operating at our highest capacity and our highest potential by having some folks in the room. So we're going to ask you to build that piece in a small way like this. I don't think that's unreasonable to do. Okay. How do you set a realistic time frame on opportunities to learn, grow, and advance? Many times it's available and communicated, but on a different timeline than what many employees would prefer. The instant gratification mentality versus hitting benchmarks and earning them. Yeah, there's a lot here. Thank you, Michael, for the question. The first is, let's more broadly define learn, grow, and advance. Like, I think too often, a lot of, especially frontline managers, see that as, can I get a promotion? Can I get a raise? And that is certainly one path to learn, grow, and advance. And there's nobody on your team who wouldn't love to get a raise. Of course, everybody loves a little bit more money. But learn, grow, and advance can also be opportunities to attend professional conferences, virtual or in person when we start to do that again. Learn, grow, and advance can be the opportunity to try their hand at something different in the same role or in the same office. Learn, grow, and advance can be lead a committee, or lead a particular kind of educational initiative at a team meeting. Learn, grow, and advance is about the frontline leader having a conversation with their direct report and saying, where do you want to go? What's important to you in the years ahead? And how can I be an advocate for you to get there? How can I be an ally to help you get there? What do you need from me and from us to help you get there? And so in some cases, it is going to be career pathing. It is going to be saying, you know what, this role is only going to allow you to move up to here. If you have a desire to move up to here in a different kind of way, let's talk about what you're going to have to do to bridge that gap. Maybe it's go back to school. Maybe it's get some specialized training. Maybe it's trying your hand at a couple of those new things that we're talking about. As far as the timing, all we can do as leaders is give people choice and opportunity. And then we hold the mirror up to them and say, I know this may not be the right time, and I know it may not be the best fit, but for right now, this is when the opportunity is available. And I don't know when the next one will come along. Or the next one may not come along for a while. So the decision you have to make is, am I willing to wait for that exact thing that I want? Or do I want to explore some other options? Giving those folks choice, having that honest dialogue, and trying to think differently about learn, grow, and advance, I think can help a lot. Okay, I believe we have some fabulous prizes to give out, but let me just finish with this. We can all agree that we want our employees to care and try, but caring and trying isn't about competence. It never has been. Caring and trying is about commitment. Or to use another word, caring and trying is about engagement. And since engagement isn't something that can be bought, since it's only something that can be earned, and I'll tell you, it's actually something that has to be triggered. The number one job of a leader has to be creating the conditions for people to thrive. The organizations that will enjoy the highest level of performance, the highest level of retention, the lowest rates of team drama, the highest rates of customer service and patient experience, and every metric that you care about in your business, the organizations who get where they want to go are going to be those who determine that the frontline leader and mid-level manager's primary role is to create the conditions that lead to engagement. That's the number one job of a leader. When a boss goes to work every day and says, my job is to figure out what these people need to be at their best every day and figure out a way to give it to them, that person and their team is going to thrive. So do your leaders view their jobs in that way? Are they innovating to create these conditions in a remote environment? And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, are you giving them the self-awareness, knowledge, skills, and tools that they need? Are you giving them the training and the support that they need to know how to create those conditions? Questions to think about, and hopefully this has been helpful for you related to engaging remote workers. But let's give away some stuff. And so I'm going to invite our NHRC folks to come back onto the screen. I am going to pull up our wheel of names because we've got everybody who registered for the program today and who came in through the front door at the beginning. We've got them all on a list, and we're going to spin a wheel and figure out what we're giving away. And so, Denise, what is our first prize that we're giving away?
I believe that we'll do the two $50 gift cards that were donated by Horton.
That is very generous. Our deepest thanks to Sean and Alec and Horton for that. Okay, here we go. So on your screen, you should see our wheel of names. We have 2 to give away, Denise, correct?
Correct.
All right, here we go. Our first $50 gift card goes to Pam. Let's all applaud. We're celebrating Pam. Denise, is there anything in particular Pam needs to do to get that gift card?
We will make arrangements through Kristen, and she will make sure that you get those gift cards.
Perfect. Our second $50 gift card, again, our thanks to the Horton Group. Mark Pittis. I hope I said your name right, Mark. I apologize if I did not. The fine folks over here are going to get in touch with you for your $50 gift card. We're also giving away 2 signed copies of my second book, which is called No More Team Drama, Ending the Gossip, Clicks, and Other Crap That Damage Workplace Teams. If you're interested, these are on Amazon, but we're going to give away 2 signed copies. And if you're the winner, we're going to have you just send your contact information to me so that I can send them to you. So the book, first book, is going to Tammy Farber. Tammy, congratulations. Tammy, you can just message me and we'll make sure we get that in the mail to you. I'll put my email address in the chat box here, but it's joe@joemull.com. Second book. Goes to Shannon. Same thing for you, Shannon. I love the cheering crowd in the background. Let me go ahead and type my email address in the chat box right now. That way, everybody who won a book can email me their address, and we'll make sure we get those sent out to you. Denise, are we giving anything else away?
Not that I'm aware of. Katie, did you want to follow up with anything?
Joe, if we have time, I'd like to get to the 2 questions that are in our chat, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I apologize. I must have missed those.
We had Mike ask a question.
Okay.
Just about realistic expectations.
I'm scrolling through to find it. Who asked the question?
It was Mike. How do you set realistic timeframes on opportunities to learn, grow, and advance? Many times it's available and communicated, but on a different timeline than what many employees would prefer. There's instant gratification mentally versus hitting benchmarks and earning them.
Okay, so we did talk about this a little bit, and I'm sorry if I didn't finish that one and was trying to read that question to everybody. At this point, it's, I think, being flexible and open to what learn, grow, and advance means, right? In some regards, it's opportunities to attend conferences, to do professional development, to try our hand at new things and at work. And it's also just having open dialogue about those timelines. Yes, I know that this opportunity may not be the right one for you right now, or that you're maybe having to wait longer than you want, but sometimes that's the way that it goes. And how can I be an ally for you and an advocate for you on your career path? As far as the instant gratification mentality goes, that's a part of dialogue as well. I think if we're transparent and clear about expectations and about what typically happens for people in your organization, that's a way to help overcome that. I think if you're sitting across from somebody who wants to get where they want to go right now, it might just be enough to say, listen, we can't make that leap all in one step, but why don't we make sure that you and I are having conversations about the 3 or 4 steps that need to happen to get you there? And let's make sure we calibrate our expectations on what a reasonable time frame is for those things. I want to be completely honest with you, and I want your expectations to be grounded and rooted in reality on your own career path and opportunities in the organization. All right, did we miss any other questions?
I think that was the last one.
Fantastic. Well, folks, it has been my absolute pleasure to be with you today. If I can be of service to you in any way, don't hesitate to get in touch. If you want to keep in touch, we do publish a twice monthly email newsletter for leaders to help you boss better. You can learn more about that and sign up over at bossbetternow.com. Thank you so much for having me today, and thanks for all that you all do to take care of so many people.